So our next keynote is Trevor Hughes. He is the Executive Director of the International Association of Privacy Professionals. In this role, Hughes leads the world's largest association of privacy professionals, and he asked me to keep his bio short. So the only other thing I'll say is that he's been very gracious and generous with us in helping us to get this program together. So thanks very much, and thanks for speaking.
Thank you. Well, good morning. My name is Trevor Hughes. I'm the Executive Director of the IAPP. We have 6,000 members in 50 countries around the world, and we represent the growing profession of privacy. All of the chief privacy officers of the world belong to our organization. There's many members in the audience, which is great to see. And I do need to apologize for my voice. Both my sons were playing in holiday weekend soccer tournaments, and I coached both teams, and as a result, I am very hoarse. I'm one of those coaches, I guess. What I want to talk to you about today is something that I call, for lack of a better phrase, data environmentalism. And the idea here is that we are rapidly moving towards an era where data needs to be seen as a resource to be protected in many ways. Certainly, we have had information security for a number of years, and we continue to need to address that. But privacy and other concerns associated with data are beginning to place significant limitations on the potential for the information economy to use that data. So I've been in this space almost 15 years, 10 very actively as a privacy professional and an executive director in the field. And I want to share some of my thoughts with you as to how we might want to conceive of the concept of privacy and how we might want to approach it. Really quickly, I've heard that it's terrible form to reference Moore's Law in a presentation at MIT, so I won't. But I will say that I normally do this presentation and talk about the velocity, the volume, and the decreased viscosity of data, which is basically to say everything that we've heard over the last day and for the rest of today. That is, that data moves quicker to more places in more ways than ever before. The other thing that's very true is that it's stored in greater and greater and greater quantities, and it sticks around for longer. The latency of data is much greater today than perhaps it has been in centuries. The other thing I'm going to talk about is that privacy is many things to many people. I want us to maybe even discard the word privacy because it is so convoluted as to perhaps have lost all value. And then I want to talk about what our responses are to privacy. So we have this convoluted, complex matrix of issues. How are we responding to those issues in society today, around the world, in corporations, in governments? And I hope to point out that most of the traditional ways to respond are strained and maybe failing outright. And that suggests that we may need some new ideas. I certainly don't have many new ideas, but I'm happy to share one thought and also report to you some of the things that are happening out on the front lines of privacy as an issue. So the first thing I want to say is my privacy ain't your privacy. That your concept of privacy is probably different than my personal concept of privacy. We could go on the street and find a whole bunch of other concepts of privacy. Privacy is different person by person by person. It's different by culture. These are all ideas, concepts that have been very well documented. In fact, Dan Solov, a professor down in Washington, has done some great work in this space. And one of the things that he recognized as a legal scholar at George Washington University is that we don't have a taxonomy of privacy. We all use this word privacy, and it means dozens and dozens of things. So I highly recommend Understanding Privacy to all of you by Dan Solov. It takes you through the taxonomy of privacy. What he does is he breaks it down into 4 categories. And I'm a lawyer, and I can wrap my head around most of this stuff as a privacy guy. One of the ways that I've found helps to explain privacy is actually to do it through art, because sometimes art can explain things that are very difficult to explain in other ways. So the first category, first of 4 that Dan Solov describes, is information collection. And in information collection, he has subcategories of surveillance and interrogation. We certainly see that everywhere today. Frequently when people talk about privacy on the streets or in the media, they're talking about surveillance, CCTV, both in public and private contexts. The piece on the right is actually at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. It is named Securitry. It's a little bit derivative and obvious, but the idea is clear that increasingly surveillance is a reality. So when people say privacy, we might need to just do a check. Do you mean surveillance, or do you mean some other form of privacy? Governmental surveillance is also important. When people say privacy, they're frequently talking about governmental surveillance. So there's a great artist, Chris Smither. He lives here in Boston. He's a blues singer. He has a song and it goes, "Justice is a lady, she's blind with her scales, she's got a big letter opener, she's been reading my mail, and I don't know why that should shame me, but it does somehow. I don't care what you say, she don't look like no lady now." If you ever see Chris Smither, he's great. That song's Happier Blue, and it's fantastic. But I think what he's saying is real, and it speaks to this idea of governmental surveillance as a privacy concept. And that is just the act of the government watching us somehow devalues us, somehow takes something away from us. Another example of surveillance is this poster. Obviously, a graphic artist had not attended, I guess, first-year literature in college, and missed the very clear allusion to 1984 that they were making. This was the London metro system, and they were having trouble with violence against bus drivers. And so their answer was to install surveillance cameras in the buses. And not only that, they did a PR campaign to promote the fact that they had surveillance cameras inside the buses. So these posters were around London for quite some time. They were the enormous posters on the side of like bus stands, secure beneath the watchful eyes, and you can see the eye in the sky with the London Tube metro system sign on it. They obviously missed the Big Brother allusion here, but it's very clear, isn't it? This is Banksy. He is a graffiti artist in the UK, very famous. You can find this just off of Tottenham Court Road, a high street in London. And through his graffiti art, he talks about closed-circuit TV and this idea of surveillance. Here in the US, we have our own version. That's Shepard Fairey. He just had a big show over at our new Museum of Modern Art here in Boston. And he talks about similar concepts of surveillance through graffiti art. And they are compelling, I think. Shepard Fairey layers in some ideas of racism and our response to terrorism. So that's the first. That's surveillance and information acquisition under the Solov taxonomy. The next is information processing. This has more subcategories of aggregation, identification, insecurity, insecurity being the lack of security. Secondary uses of data and exclusion, meaning you don't get something because data has been collected about you. It's discriminatory practices, basically. So there's more here. The famous New Yorker cartoon is the great thing about the internet is nobody knows you're a dog. Well, with information aggregation and collection, we know you're a dog now. We know you visit the Lassie site a lot, and we know what kind of rawhide shoes you like. Ideas of security and insecurity are both information security. Certainly, we know that space quite well. InfoSec has been around for about 20 years plus. And we now try to bake it into all of our systems, but it's also physical. You know, we draw lines sometimes around privacy areas. The security of data is not just digital, it's also physical. On the left is a secondary use of data that surprised the Canadian government. The Canadian Privacy Commissioner had her cell phone records purchased and published in basically the Times Magazine of Canada. And then they put her picture on the front. Certainly she wasn't too happy about that, and TELUS, the carrier that sold the data, I think had a rather prickly meeting with her soon after. Not only do we use data, do we process data, but we disseminate data, we push data out.